witnesses, our colleagues. It's hard to express and to put into words how bad things are in Texas at the moment, as my colleague, the chairman of Foreign Affairs, understands as well. And, all of us with eyes who are looking at what's actually occurring in Texas as we speak. The number of videos I'm getting sent to me from people down on the ground, the number of texts from people in Border Patrol and in DPS explaining how egregious the situation is, it's pretty extraordinary. I got a text just a little bit ago, says, quote, "Be advised of the language." These messages from local law enforcement. Quote, "As of last night, the radios went crazy for West and South Laredo. Waves of illegals, literally just group after group, bum rushing the border. The agents were spread thin as hell. Constables, Precinct 2, Webb County attorneys, and our only game warden are working with their asses off in Rio Bravo, El Cenizo, and South Laredo. Webb County has a stand-down order to not pursue, either on foot or in vehicle. Now you've got down here, in my PCD, we're literally all doubled up because our units are breaking down every other day. Ranchers are calling every other hour, stating there are folks on their property, but we can't get there fast enough. I hate to say this, but we're getting our asses handed to us. I used to have patterns, trends, and knew the drop-off pickup areas, but now it's effing free-for-all. Approximately 600 bodies at the Lavarius Gate, just half a mile east from Yarborough, happening right now in El Paso. Another guy, we are almost at Broken Arrow. We are holding over 27,000 in custody. Of that 27,000, a little over 5,000 are processed, waiting for their next phase in the process. Every sector is near 150% capacity. I keep getting, reached out from sheriffs, from people working in law enforcement, DPS. I just got this video where there's just streams of people streaming across the Rio Grande as we speak right now. That's from 5 minutes ago. This is what it's like in our state, in our communities, in the places that we represent. And the consequences here are pretty significant. And unfortunately, while my colleagues like to dismiss this as being somehow calloused and cold-hearted to people seeking asylum, the fact of the matter is the vast majority of the individuals coming are not fleeing from a legitimate fear of persecution, a credible fear of persecution of their political beliefs or religious beliefs, as the data bears out, but rather seeking a better way of life, which no one begrudges. Not one person begrudges the people that are fleeing to come here to find a better way of life. But what you have here is a system being perpetrated by an administration that doesn't care about the rule of law, that is the beacon of hope for the people around the world to come to a place that respects the rule of law, but rather is allowing cartels to profit, moving these individuals, is allowing this process to continue in which people end up getting harmed and hurt. The 856 migrants along the South Texas lands along the Rio Grande or along southern Arizona that died last year, bodies found on ranches, 80-year-old, 75-year-old, 70-year-old ranchers finding dead bodies of young women, of migrants along their ranches. We just blithely just ignore that. We just act like that's nothing. We act like that's somehow the humanitarian and, quote, Christian thing to do, to say that it's compassionate to allow our wide open borders to continue. The folks have repeatedly heard the story, the horrific story of the 53 migrants who basically cooked in a tractor trailer in San Antonio last summer in Texas. Just horrific what law enforcement had to find. You say, oh, well, that's a problem because we don't have open enough borders. We don't have enough going on to process folks. The fact of the matter is, if we were actually enforcing our laws in the way that they are designed to ensure that people who have a legitimate asylum claim can have their claim heard and processed, but we are not opening our door to every single individual that would come to the river or come to the border, then we would have not chaos, but we would actually have operational control of the border. To watch Secretary Mayorkas, as my friend from Tennessee questioned, come and sit in front of the committee and say, and smirk to me, saying we have operational control of the border. Saying that when he's staring at the statute that says that you must have operational control of the border, and look at me and say, we have operational control of the border, which is what he did a year ago. Meanwhile, just ignore when I showed him the faces of fentanyl, the dead Americans, the young Americans dead from fentanyl, page after page after page of thousands of American young, the number one killer of our young between 18 years of age and 45 years of age. I met with 3 fentanyl moms last Thursday morning at a restaurant in Austin. Talked to them, and one of their sons, never done drugs to the best of her knowledge, it took a Valium, it was laced with fentanyl, gone. 8 kids in the school district in which I live, in Hayes ISD in Texas, dead since last August from fentanyl poisonings. Over a dozen or more that have been saved from Narcan, but through the use of Narcan. This is the state of things in Texas. And we're causing it. We're driving it. People talk about the root cause of this. We're the root cause of it. We're the ones putting a big neon sign on the Rio Grande that says, come on up, pay your thousands of dollars to the cartels, come on up, get abused, send your children right on the top of train cars, send your children into the hands of the cartels, allow them to get sold into the sex trafficking trade, allow them to get put in stash houses in Houston, Texas, in San Antonio, Texas, in Laredo, Texas, McAllen, Texas, to get raped, abused, tortured, spend thousands of dollars. We allow that to continue. Get sold into the slave labor trade throughout the country. And then we have this defense on the 85,000 children that were, oh, we can't find them. Oh, no, that's not true. They were found, but it was just we didn't contact them on first try. But then you go look into it a little further. It's like, well, they did find some later, but they still haven't contacted all of them. Not one of us would treat our own child that way. Not one. Like, oh, I wonder where that child is. I tried to call, didn't get a hold of him. Well, gosh, I hope they're with the parent or the uncle or the, oh, is it the uncle? Is it the real uncle? Is it not the uncle? But we don't care about all that because it is far easier to say we're compassionate. Oh, look at us. We're Christian and compassionate with open borders. And it's ridiculous. The rhetoric surrounding this bill which attempts to do nothing more than solidify our existing laws put in place predominantly, if not entirely, on a bipartisan basis, yet being routinely ignored by this administration, routinely flouted and abused by this administration. I've heard discussion of parole, the use of parole. I wonder if my friend from California, Mr. McClintock, could talk just a little bit about the extent to which parole is supposed to be on a case-by-case basis and not categorically used in direct violation of our laws, regardless of whether it is for a good purpose or not. Would the gentleman agree that that is not what parole laws are supposed to be for?
Parole is an individual exception from the enforcement of a law. A categorical parole is amending that law. Under our Constitution, the law does not live in the president's mouth. It must be changed by the representatives of the people through the constitutional process. This president has taken upon himself to change the laws at whim by declaring a categorical parole. There is no such thing.
Does the gentleman from California agree with me that the intent behind the legislation that came through the judiciary portion of this bill and the letter of what came through the Judiciary Committee is designed to ensure that our current laws are enforced and that we are making sure that we are fixing some of the problems in our current interpretation and application of the law to protect individuals, to protect children from abuses in terms of unaccompanied children currently being abused because of the TVPRA application with respect to unaccompanied children, because we've got a situation with respect to the Flores court opinion that has then been turned into policy that has caused essentially a separation problem or a sort of catch-22 on how we deal with families. Would the gentleman agree that the purpose behind that is to actually protect individuals so that we can enforce the law properly with the maximum amount of care for the individuals in question?
Well, yes. Again, this is not fair to legitimate asylum claims who have to wait years and years and years to have their cases heard because the courts have been glutted with millions of fraudulent claims. We do no service to our entire nation is built upon the concept of legal immigration. The fact that when people come to our country, they come with a sincere desire to become Americans, to raise their children as Americans, to acquire a common language, a common culture. They obey all of our laws. They wait patiently in line. They do everything our country asks of them to do, while millions now of illegal aliens are cutting in line in front of them. This bill is designed to restore the legal immigration process, to assure the rights of every person coming to this country, and to assure the rights of the people of the United States to have a country.
The gentleman from California agreed with me that by doing what we are doing in this legislation, we would in fact curb releases into the United States, which is the main magnet and draw for the flood
That's the whole
currently
reason.
occurring.
The whole reason to make a fraudulent asylum claim is you get automatic entry into the country. You get lots of free stuff. You get a ticket anywhere you want to go in the country. You get indefinite residency permission, indefinite work authorization. And you know that years down the line, when your case is finally heard and is rejected, you're not going to be deported. So there's every incentive to make a fraudulent claim. This bill removes those incentives and will make it much harder for this or any future president to abuse the laws as they have.
And is the purpose not also to make sure that families stay together and are united through the duration of the processing of their asylum claim rather than separated?
Yes, exactly right. This fixes the florist decision, and it requires people coming together as families to remain together as families. And if they want to file an asylum claim, then the question is detain, as the current law requires, or return to Mexico or a safe third country to await adjudication of their claim together.
It is similarly protect unaccompanied children with respect to the current policy that resulted from the application of TVPRA and so forth, so that it is now ensuring that they get sent home safely rather than drawing a magnet for children to be put on the top of train cars or sent solo, which, by the way, is the ultimate family division, i.e. child separation policy.
As I said earlier, the Border Patrol agents are unanimous in this opinion that if you want to stop the trafficking of children, you need to send them safely home. That will dry up the cartel's business and will end this ongoing tragedy.
I heard earlier from earlier testimony that, quote, Title 42 is cruel and restrictive policy. I think it was a gentleman from Texas, my colleague from San Antonio, that Title 42 is, quote, cruel and restrictive policy. First of all, is the gentleman aware that Title 42 is set to expire the day after tomorrow?
Yes, thanks to this administration.
And when Title 42 expires, does the gentleman agree that essentially a third to half of the flood that has been coming across the border to date has been dealt with or turned away through Title 42?
Yeah, I have no way to forecast the future, but it is quite clear that what is unfolding this week with the collapse of Title 42 is the collapse of what has remained of our southern border, and I think we're going to see that in very graphic terms.
Would it surprise the gentleman that that the gentleman from San Antonio and another colleague from Texas, Mr. Kassar, requested $38 million in FEMA emergency relief for San Antonio in preparation for the expiration of Title 42?
Well, again, we're watching the collapse of our social safety net that was designed to help Americans in need, and that's not just at the border, that's everywhere now.
A question for the gentleman, my colleague from Texas. Could you explain just a little bit with respect to the authorities that be put forth with the State Department to negotiate asylum agreements and the purpose of that?
Yeah, basically the provision reinstates and codifies into law the migrant protection protocols, otherwise known as Remain in Mexico, and the asylum ACAs, the agreements that, Mr. Roy, you know very well, was working. And on day one, President Biden rescinded these policies, and every Border Patrol agent I talk to, they tell me about the direct cause and effect between that rescission and what we're seeing on the border today. And there's no question that the political asylum is the magnet, it's the draw. The cartels know our laws, and when they saw this change, it didn't take them very long to exploit it for millions of dollars and exploiting the children all along the way.
Now, as a former federal prosecutor, a former head of criminal division at the Office of the Attorney General in Texas, as the former head of the Homeland Security Committee, as the current head of the Foreign Affairs Committee, do these numbers sound correct to you? And if you have anything to add, please do. That kidnappings, that as many as 20,000 migrants en route to the southern border are kidnapped each year. Criminals and gangs profiting off these migrants by demanding ransoms for the return. Does that sound correct to you?
It sounds correct, but you don't know what you don't know. It could be a lot more.
Abuse of women and girls, that between 60 and 80%, according to certain sources that document this thing, humanitarian organizations of Central American women and girls traveling to the U.S. and Mexico border are sexually assaulted on their way to the United States. I've heard numbers that run the gamut, but would you agree that, not knowing exactly what the percentage is, a non-insignificant number of these girls are abused on their journey? Just the journey part. Let's forget what happens when they get to the United States, but the journey part of getting to the United States. Does the gentleman agree?
No, I completely agree.
Does the gentleman agree that cartels profit to an extraordinary amount, that at least one conservative estimate said they gain over $14 million daily from the illicit enterprises related to human smuggling and moving human beings for profit across our southern border?
That's correct.
Would it surprise the gentleman that in Kinney County, Texas, on Friday, Kinney County deputies found dozens of dehydrated migrants in an overheated train car in 100-degree weather?
Unfortunately, that happens way too often. As you cited, the San Antonio case, 40 people in a tractor trailer, 18-wheeler, smothered to death.
Would the gentleman agree that DHS has arrested more than 4,000 people for crimes related to the exploitation of children in fiscal year 2022, which was an 18% jump from FY 2021, and that they report that the policies at the border have had a significant impact on that?
No, that is correct.
Or that an estimated 60% of Latin American children who are set to cross the border alone or with human smugglers have been caught by the cartels and are being abused in child pornography or for drug trafficking?
That is correct.
Or that between fiscal year 2020 and fiscal year 2022, there was 400% jump in unaccompanied alien children encounters, again, between FY 2020, the first year, or the year just prior to the Biden administration, when President Trump was in power, and then FY 22, the full fiscal year under Biden, there was a 400% jump in unaccompanied alien children encounters. Can the gentleman does he agree with that?
I do, and it's all a product of the rescission of the Remain in Mexico policy.